Okay, so 11:05, so we will start our presentation. Welcome everyone. This is all new to Wendy and I in some respects of over Zoom, and I'm sure it is for the majority of others. So the interaction is really difficult for us. If I can introduce, my name is Tracy Cox. I'm a consultant learning disability nurse, and I've worked within the NHS, within AWP and in assessment and treatment, and also for the CLDT. I'm presently working in social care. Wendy?
I'm Wendy Wright. I'm an occupational therapist, recently retired, but prior to that I worked in the NHS in an A&T unit. Then I moved to the CJLS, and then I moved to the social care.
And I suppose we were interested, both Wendy and I, about some of the jargon that we use and some of the acronyms that we use. We've already started to do that this morning by saying CJLS and also A&T, those sort of things. So what we wanted to explore is some of the jargon that we use in what might be termed service land. And so we've got a very short presentation of about 15 minutes. Then we're going to get you into breakout rooms to start to look at that or discuss it and explore some of the words that we might be using to describe individuals or behaviors or whatever. So it gives us that opportunity to think about jargon and the way that we use it.
And some reasons why we might use it.
Yeah, definitely. So shall we just carry on then? So
yeah,
all pictures used are from Open Future, so we have to give them recognition, although some of them latterly are from PBS as well. Okay. Start with Dave Hinsberger. Some of you may have heard of him, but what we do matters, really deeply matters, but how we do it even more. And I think we need to really sit back and think about the terminology, the language, the communication, and be mindful of whether we're at a research level or as a support worker or as an individual receiving support. Okay. Do you want to talk through these, Wendy?
No, you carry on. You're on a roll.
So the way we think affects our beliefs, affects the way, it's people coming up saying, sorry, I just saw that people kept coming into the, to join us. Affects the way we talk and affects reality. And behind every word we write, there is a person. We need to be mindful and think about the way that we write things about individuals. We all know ourselves when we've been to appointments, whether it's for our physical health, our mental health, that individuals write things about us. And that's when it's written, everybody can see it, or most people see it. And we need to be thoughtful and mindful of that. If the person gets to read it, what are their views? What do they feel about it? And or families and or other carers.
And I know as an occupational therapist, I've written reports with hindsight now, I've written reports that another occupational therapist would understand, but whether the individual themselves or the people supporting them would understand. And part of that, I think, is, for me, it was a defensiveness thing. There's historically been a view that occupational therapists make baskets, fluffy bunnies and cups of tea. And I think I felt a need to use quite technical language to give my suggestions some kudos. But actually, with hindsight now, it doesn't mean a thing to the person who's reading it. It might be useful for commissioners justifying getting funding for somebody, but actually for the person that it's meant to help, it couldn't have been less helpful, if I'm honest, and that is quite embarrassing.
And I think we see today, especially, that we are doing more easy read, but even some of that easy read is not as accessible as what it could be. It doesn't get across what it needs to get across. And, you know, I am very mindful that we need to maybe have, you know, both in some respects, but we need to try to work with the easy read more so than the complex. And I think this is a PBS conference, and PBS already, Positive Behaviour Support. What does that mean? Already we're starting to break down and say it's about an individual and how they may be, how they live their daily life. It's not just about behaviour, and that's what we've got to get away from. Even though it's positive behaviour support, it's about the whole person. And again, we go into that person-centeredness in some respects. So we'll talk through a few more of these because these are really helpful. If enough people think of the person as a problem, he or she will begin to believe it too. Okay. These are fabulous in some respects. So, dear Serviceland, if only there were points for how many times you said person-centered. Okay. And again, I want a life and I want not a service. And how many of us talk about our services? How many of us don't think about it's individuals' homes that we are going into, but no, it's a residential home, or it's a service says there. So, you know, it's starting us to really sit back and think about how we talk about people's lives. My guys, my individuals, my clients, my friends. I am not your anything. I am Nigel. And I think we all get stuck. I say, you know, and I have definitely, and I try to think about it more often, that I say, sometimes I'm saying service user, saying client. I've learned a lot from one of the family members who's part of our steering group for the network. She talks about folk, she talks about individuals, she talks about people, persons, and I think that's so important for us to start to think about. Okay. The people you support do not live in your workplace. You work in their home. And I think that gets missed so much, and it becomes the office space. So even I'm mindful that I go and knock on the front door, or I have a fob and I let myself in. And is that right for me to do it? No, it isn't. I should knock on the door and wait for somebody to come and say whether it's okay for me to go in. We take it for granted that we can step into anybody's home at any time, unless they've got their own front door and has their own flat. Then that might be different than a residential type provision where you have communal. So it's about, again, thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay, I can't read the other one because all of our pictures across it. So non-compliant. So we use the word non-compliant, and like a stick against people with learning disability. What does non-compliant mean? You know,
I think I would be the world's worst for compliancy. If I was receiving a service, if I'm not happy with something, I won't do it and I won't accept it. But I'm not called non-compliant.
Yeah. And you wouldn't be labelled, and that label sticks with you. And again, it's about what we earlier. It gets written down and it gets attached to you. So later in life, that historical that might have happened for a day or 2 days or whatever is still with you now. Okay, definitely. Have you been out on your community program today, Stephen? No, I've been swimming. Non-verbal communication without words. Client, non-verbal, service user, non-compliant, all of these words, attention seeking. You know, we use that frequently. And I think it was just the other day that a psychiatrist said, is this person attention seeking? And you just feel like turning around and saying, well, yeah, of course they are. They're asking for some support. It's not about attention seeking. It's about saying, I need you to hear what I'm saying or to be with me. It's those sort of things. Tell me again why it isn't called challenging behaviour when you get upset. So again, when we get upset, we're not deemed as challenging. Now, I know we can go back to definition about intensity, frequency, duration, but you know, we need to think about these things, definitely. Let's go out in the community. My biggest bugbear, and especially for people with learning disabilities, is have you accessed the community today? Why do we say that only to people with learning disabilities? I don't turn to a friend or turn to Wendy and say, have you accessed the community today, Wendy? I would just say, have you been out? And so, go on,
sorry,
Wendy.
I've gone in and just had a quick look through people's records to see what's been happening for them. And you read CA on Tuesday. What does that mean? Community access on Tuesday. Why not just write, had a great time, they went to the shop? What does CA mean to anybody?
Yeah, definitely. So again, tell me why you don't go out on outings. Toileted, fed and bathed. I see that quite a bit in reports, especially care. But you could be helped, supported, assisted. So I've put up some of the bits from Build. All behaviour happens for a reason. Challenging behaviour is no different. I mean, this is the opportunity that, and again, they're reviewing this, revising this. It helps to try to enable people to understand it a little bit better. It is more, I think, for staff than it is for the individuals we support. But I think, again, the language within PBS, we have to be mindful as to who our audience is. If we're looking at support for a support worker, and we're using some of the keywords around antecedents, consequences, behavior modification, or I don't know, backward change. There's lots of different things, reinforcers. There are things that they wouldn't necessarily understand. And why can't we use, well, what happened before the behavior rather than it's an antecedent? Because I think a lot of our staff know a lot about PBS, but they don't have the terminology that goes with it. So until you start talking through that and say, that links to this, they start to understand it a little bit more. So again, I've just put up the different resources that are available. PERMA model of wellbeing. You know, the majority of people won't know about PERMA unless they've done a course on PBS, but they do know about emotions, engagement, or getting people, being connected with people, relationships, meaning. They know those sort of things, but they won't know that it's called PERMA. Okay, and again, aggressive, cruelty, neglect, boss, quarrel. I mean, and again, with our behaviour support plans, being mindful again around how much the individual part of that plan and is in agreement with it, and it's accessible so that they understand what it means and how they're supported, as in they may get distressed, and is distress the right word to use, or do we go back to challenging behaviour, or what do we use? I'm not sure. So, and what does good care and support planning look like? So again, this is from person-centered planning. So, you know, there are so many different models, resources out there that have become accessible, but are still not as accessible or don't talk the same language as maybe some of the individuals we support do on a day-to-day basis.
And at the end of the day, I think the individual at the centre of that care doesn't care what model we're using. Does it give me the support that I need? And have I got the people there to help me in the way I want to be helped?
Yeah, definitely. So these are some of the words that we felt were quite, they're not all of them. It's not an exhaustive list. We have got some others, but these are some of the words that we use when supporting individuals. And how would you feel if these were used to describe, talk, or write about you? So what we would like is you to go away into those small groups, breakout rooms, use these and start to think about, do you use those? And what does that mean? How would you feel? Or what does it mean for that individual? You know, I hear so much that they've absconded. How can you abscond from your own home? None of us abscond from our own home. We just go out, don't we? We might go out without support, but we don't abscond. You might do that if you're locked up in hospital. They might.
Only if you've been sectioned.
Or if you're sectioned. I was just saying that these are some of the other words that we have talked about as well. And I'm sure within your groups that you may have come up with lots of different, one of them, especially for individuals who we support within their own homes, we or staff talk about them going home to their parents. It's their parents' home, but it's not their home anymore, because their home is where they are living. And we tend to forget that as well. So, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what your group was like, Wendy, if there are any things that came up through your group.
We had a bit of a challenge because I didn't realise that the shared screen didn't come with us.
Yeah.
So I was doing it from my other screen and going through. So I don't know that we got as free flow in a discussion as we might have done. But yeah, a lot of it came down to the things we say can be quite judgmental. And it very much came down to thinking about how would I feel if that was said about me, if I was described in that way.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we looked at was it depends on who you're communicating with and for what reasons. And it does start with organisations taking some responsibility, because some, such as CQC, will want to see certain things written and they'll be looking at it, and they should start to recognise that maybe they need to change as well. So it's bigger than just you and I doing it on a day-to-day, but that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Here, I'm aware that we're into sort of question time, so it's just checking whether there are some questions that people want to ask, or if there's anything that's coming up through the chat.
Not so far. The chat function works slightly differently when it's a webinar and people submit it through a Q&A. So what I'll say is, if you have a question for Wendy and Tracy, please pop it in the chat, or just unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah.
Because you have the power to do that in a meeting rather than in a...
I don't know if it's exactly a question, but I suppose when it comes to the wording of and different terminology, you're never going to please everybody. What some people might like the term challenging behaviour, some behaviours that challenge, and I think it's always going to be, you're always going to be kind of walking on eggshells if you're trying to please everybody. So I guess it's just coming up with a more friendly terminology rather than, yeah, I lost my train of thought now.
I think you're right, Stephen, and I think it's really difficult because, you know, whatever we replace something with, it gets replaced by something else and something else and something else, but it's got the individual that we're supporting in some respects. But some of I was talking within our group, especially some of the language around PBS, and when we have support workers, but we have then other people who are more highly trained within PBS, and whether they're researchers or practitioners, the language that they may talk, say or use may not be understood by the support workers who are actually doing the day-to-day job, and they are doing what it is that practitioner is saying, but they just don't know that it is that language. You know, so it's
so we create barriers to understanding, don't we?
Yeah, I think we do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I think there is a lot of complicated terminology within PBS. Things like what's one of the ones that I kind of talk about? Strategic capitulation.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
That's what we use when we like to sound clever, you know. That's
giving in with a plan. I always explain that that's really what it means. Giving in with a plan.
What I go
Why can't we just say giving in with a plan? So we have to say strategic capitulation.
In Peter Baker's talk, there was I'm paraphrasing very slightly, but he did use this term. He basically said, all the clever dicks need to get off their chairs and go and actually work with people.
And I think that is just so
for sure.
Good.
I like that.
Thumbs up what we've been trying to get across perfectly.
Hi, I have a question. Well, it's just a little little bit of an addition really on to that. I think in our group, and I'm not sure who said it, but they said something about they would use different language, obviously when talking with the person, and different, more, I suppose, professional language when maybe speaking to another professional. And I don't know, I have some thoughts on that, that if any notes are being written anywhere and theoretically anyone can access those notes at their request, should it ever be that we are professionalising language? Should it just be that we're really trying not to? I don't know, it's just putting it out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point.
It's a good point. Brilliant point.
And again, I think one of the people in our chat was also talking about, he's a consultant psychiatrist. So the way that he would word things maybe to a GP would be very different than he would to the individual that he provides support to. So again, it's about who our audience is, and whether we're getting across the right information to the right people. And, sometimes people don't take as much heed of some of the easy read because it's not professionalized in the way that, the language could be, I suppose. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think we all need to just take stock and think about how we are using language, where we can make a difference to start to do that, whether that's on just a one-to-one that you are doing, or whether that then becomes within homes, or whether you're in a community team or wherever you are. I think we have the responsibility to start to think about it, rather than, the whole society needs to change, because that isn't going to happen overnight by any means. So definitely not.
A couple of comments, ladies. Steve has added that he also likes the term episodic severity, which I agree with. If it takes you 5 minutes to explain a term, then you've gotten a really good one. And Judy has commented, when you learn about PBS, there's way too much jargon and it takes time to be competent and be able to use that language. Is this something we need to think about at the level of training for PBS? And that's a really good point. There's a talk later, Leah Fenema Hall, who is a BCBA, and my God, if any profession, and I am a behaviour analyst, so I'm allowed to say these things, but if any profession is awful for, being reinforced by their own language, it is behaviour analysts. Like, we can do it. But Leah is talking about how the only place for us to talk like the geeks that we are is with one another. In the pub, and we like to use that language. That is the only place for it. And her talk is mentioned that, and it's called How to Burn Bridges. So I think we are definitely getting better as a field in recognizing we must talk.
And I'm also mindful that I was attending the UK PBS Alliance communities, and Edwin was saying that they're already starting to look at some of the resources around positive behaviour support, of review. Are they getting across what they need to get across? So they're asking people to start to view them and comment on whether it needs to be more accessible or easy read in some respects, or the terminology changes. So I think as long as it stays on the agenda and we ask the questions, and even if people go back into their own workplaces, because you are in workplaces, and start to say, what language do we use, and is that the right language to use? And if you do it just locally, that's the starting point in some respects as well, I think. So definitely.
Just quickly comment on one of the words from the last one, because goals was on there, and I like the term goals, but I think one of the discussions that we had in our group is that it comes down to whether those goals are set by that individual or whether they're set by staff, whether it becomes a true goal or not. Because I have goals in my life.
I have goals in my life.
Somebody else wouldn't set goals for me.
And when other people then review my goals, and for the next 3 years I'm working to the same goals, because what's the purpose of those goals and who are they for?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to draw things to a close. We've got 2 or 3 minutes. But Kirsty has highlighted that CQC have a consultation out on their strategy right now, and that it would be good to get the language improved. That's being and Karen's pointed out that when you're a family member and you have a child with a learning difficulty or learning disability, that the jargon, it isn't jargon, it's life.
Yeah, definitely.